The war escalated after Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler invaded Poland on the September 1st, 1939, which made the United States, United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union to respond with war threats, which started on September 3rd, 1939. The world was drawn into a conflict so vast and destructive that it changed the course of human history forever. It was known as World War II, a war that reached nearly every corner of the globe and involved dozens of nations, millions of soldiers, and countless innocent civilians. The roots of the war lay in unresolved tensions from the past, economic hardship, and the rise of aggressive ideologies. In Europe, Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, sought to expand its territory and impose its control on neighboring nations. In Asia, Imperial Japan pursued dominance through military force. Alongside Fascist Italy, these nations formed what became known as the Axis powers. Opposing them were the Allied powers, including the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, the United States, and many others. At first, the world watched with uncertainty as countries fell one by one. Poland was invaded, France collapsed, cities across Europe burned as air raids turned homes into ruins and civilians into refugees. The war quickly became global. Battles were fought on land, at sea, and in the air. The oceans became deadly battlegrounds where submarines hunted ships beneath the waves. In the skies, aircraft rained destruction on cities and military targets alike. On the ground, soldiers endured harsh conditions, freezing winters, scorching deserts, dense forests, fighting not only the enemy, but hunger, disease, and exhaustion. Civilians suffered terribly. Entire populations were displaced. Families were separated, never to reunite. One of the darkest chapters of the war was the Holocaust, where millions of Jews and other persecuted groups were systematically murdered. It was a crime that revealed how deep human cruelty could go when hatred was allowed to grow unchecked. In 1941, the war reached a turning point. The attack on Pearl Harbor drew the United States into the conflict, while Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union opened one of the deadliest fronts in history. From that moment on, the scale of the war intensified. Casualties rose into the tens of millions. Across these battlefields were ordinary individuals, farmers, students, factory workers, now wearing uniforms. One of them was James, a young soldier among millions, sent far from home. Like many others, his story was not unique, yet it mattered. He witnessed destruction, loss, and fear, and survived only by endurance and determination. His experience reflected that of countless soldiers whose names history would never record. As the years passed, the tide slowly turned against the Axis powers. The Allies pushed forward, liberating occupied territories at a terrible cost. In Europe, the war ended in 1945 with the defeat of Nazi Germany. In the Pacific, the conflict came to a close after atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan's surrender. When the fighting finally stopped, the world stood in shock. More than 60 million people were dead. Cities lay in ruins. Nations were exhausted and broken. Yet from the ashes came a determination to rebuild and prevent such destruction from ever happening again. New international institutions were formed, borders were redrawn, and the modern world began to take shape. For soldiers like James, returning home did not mean leaving the war behind. The memories remained, the sights, the sounds, the faces of those who never returned. He, like millions of others, carried the war within him long after the peace was declared. And so, the story of World War II remains more than a historical event. It is a warning about the dangers of unchecked power and hatred. It is a reminder of the suffering of civilians caught in global conflict. And it is a tribute to ordinary people like James, whose lives were forever changed by the greatest war the world has ever known.